Kody Brown sat alone in the quiet corners of the once bustling Flagstaff rental, once the heart of his large, unconventional family. The place, formerly full of laughter, whispered conversations, and the movement of dozens of lives, now stood still. A layer of dust clung to the windows, and the silence stretched too long between walls that once held so many secrets. 2 weeks earlier, Robyn had left, without confrontation, without chaos. She'd simply packed and gone. Her note, placed on the kitchen table, read, "You never needed me as much as they do." He clinched the paper, knuckles white. Cody had never known this kind of stillness. For decades, his life had been defined by overlapping schedules, holiday drama, and the sound of children in every room. Now it was just him, no wives, no kids, just the hum of a muted television and a cold mug of coffee. But silence doesn't always come uninvited. Sometimes it's earned. Gabriel Brown had been adrift for months. After the loss of his brother Garrison, grief had turned into quiet withdrawal. It was Janelle who first suggested the podcast, an outlet for her children to express their stories. "It's a place for us to speak," she murmured, sitting in her modest living room, setting up a banner, a laptop, and a discount microphone. Gabriel's voice cracked slightly as he recorded the first episode. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't insult. He simply spoke about missed calls on holidays, unread messages on the anniversary of Garrison's death, and watching his mother cry alone while social media posts showed Cody enjoying weekend trips. The podcast was titled The Invisible Son. It exploded in popularity. Downloads soared, but it was the second episode that changed everything. Solomon, one of Robyn's younger children, spoke quietly into the mic. He had never made a public statement before. "He told me not to talk about Mom's panic attacks," Solomon confessed. "Said it would make us look broken." He described hearing muffled sobs through locked doors, and his confusion when those moments were dismissed as resting. Listeners were stunned. The boy many saw as Cody's golden child had been silently struggling too. Robyn's household fell into an emotional haze after the episode. Aurora stopped hosting her usual gatherings. Brianna withdrew. Robyn, nudged by her children, started therapy. In one of her first sessions, she admitted, "I thought defending him meant loving him, but I was just protecting silence." Meanwhile, Janelle, always the one to take action, realized the potential of the podcast. She booked a simple studio in Utah, no lights, no makeup, no producers, just raw stories. The live stream featured Janelle in the center, surrounded by Gabriel, Savannah, Solomon, Aurora, Brianna, and even Dayton, who hadn't spoken publicly in 3 years. They shared journal entries, voice memos, and recollections. Cody's attempts to stop the wave only fueled it further. Messages he'd sent urging them to stop were read aloud. "I was told not to exaggerate," Aurora said, voice tight with emotion. "But I remember every time I had to help Mom through a breakdown, and I was told I was being dramatic." Dayton, in a rare and pained moment of Robyn, previously silent, began filming a quiet documentary, just her, sitting on a couch, no makeup, no script. She looked into the lens and said, "In trying to make him feel strong, I forgot who I was. I let things happen to my children, and I'm done being quiet." Cody's empire didn't just crumble. It transformed into a cautionary tale. Meanwhile, Janelle relocated to North Carolina. She sold her portion of Coyote Pass, left the ghost of the family dream behind, and began pursuing her long-held vision of owning a flower farm. Her move signaled more than geography. It was a spiritual relocation, a complete departure from the identity that had kept her tied to someone else's idea of a future. Christine had long ago given up her share of the land, seeking peace rather than property. And Mary, once unwavering in her loyalty, finally stepped away. All three had invested far more than money. Decades of emotional labor, care, and resilience. And what of Coyote Pass? Sold. The land once meant to symbolize unity now stands as a monument to the collapse of a dream that was never built on equal footing. Cody kept the lion's share of the sale. Christine, who many agree was the heart of the family, received nothing. She had walked away with dignity, but perhaps not with justice. Still, she has found happiness with a new partner, David Woolley. Her openness, once criticized, is now cherished. She's building a new life with someone who values her transparency and warmth. The show, the land, and the family may fade, but the voices that once went unheard are now loud and clear. What once was a patriarch's legacy is now a living archive of growth, survival, and truth. Gabriel Brown had never been the loudest in the room. He had grown up in the shadows of his father's spotlight, in the corners of crowded living rooms filled with rotating camera crews and endless takes of family unity. But now, at 23, something inside him had finally shifted. The loss of his brother, Garrison, had burned a hole in Gabriel's chest, a hole that no scripted apology or public statement from Cody could ever fill. And as the anniversary of Garrison's passing approached, Gabriel decided he wouldn't sit quietly anymore. He opened his laptop one rainy afternoon in Flagstaff, plugged in a second-hand microphone Janelle had bought for him from a pawn shop, and hit record. No intro music. No fanfare. Just truth. "This isn't for ratings. This is for healing," he said. For every brown kid who was told to suck it up. For every time we were told not to talk about that on camera. I'm not here to protect anyone's image anymore. Not even my dad's. The episode dropped on a Tuesday. The internet exploded by Wednesday. The podcast that lit the match. Titled House of Cards, Gabriel's debut podcast didn't pull punches. He detailed moments of emotional neglect, especially during Garrison's final year. How calls for support were ignored. How Cody had prioritized Robyn's birthday dinner over checking in on his son's spiraling mental health. He said Garrison was dramatic, that he was being manipulative. I heard him say it while he sat on Robyn's couch, planning a barbecue. Listeners were floored. Kody Brown had built a reality TV empire on the premise of fatherhood, leadership, and religious devotion. But Gabriel's voice cut through the carefully curated image. And then came the clip that shook the internet. One night I heard Solomon crying through the wall. He's Robyn's son. He told me Dad yelled at him for being too sensitive. Solomon said, "I miss when he used to play Legos with me." And I realized I wasn't the only one feeling invisible. The name drop of Solomon, long considered Cody's golden child from his most favored wife, Robyn, was the dynamite. Janelle leans in. When the podcast went viral, Janelle didn't hesitate. She saw it as a reckoning, a long overdue disruption of the silence that had bound her children for years. Instead of offering vague platitudes or hiding behind press statements, she promoted the podcast directly. She posted on Instagram with a photo of Gabriel and Garrison in happier times, captioned, "I'm proud of my son. Truth isn't disrespect. Truth is necessary. Hashtag House of Cards, hashtag Speak Up." She then went on a media tour, not to gossip, but to advocate. Appearing on The View, Today Show, and even CNN, she spoke not just as a reality TV mom, but as a woman who had spent nearly 30 years in a complex web of silence, religious justification, and emotional fragmentation. "This isn't about bashing anyone," she said firmly on The View. "It's about making space for the kids who were raised in this house of mirrors, who were never allowed to say, "I'm hurting. I won't let them be silenced anymore." Her authenticity resonated. The world had seen her as the quiet, no-nonsense wife for years. Now she was emerging as the voice of Brown family truth. She launched a foundation, Untangled Roots, dedicated to helping children of polygamous or emotionally oppressive families find their voice. Within days, it raised over $500,000 in grassroots donations. But while Janelle and Gabriel were speaking from the heart, not everyone appreciated the spotlight being redirected. Cody, the Thunder Thief. Watching from his sparsely populated Instagram live account, Kody Brown couldn't sit still. The sudden public sympathy for Gabriel and Janelle stung him, not because he disagreed with them, though he did, but because he wasn't the center of it. He began posting erratic videos, long monologues about fatherhood, the burden of leadership, and how there are two sides to every story. He even changed his bio to read, "Truth, Faith, Misunderstood Father." But it was the tell-all livestream he scheduled without TLC that revealed his true colors. Gabriel is hurting, and I love him, but there's a lot he doesn't understand. I had to manage 18 kids. You try doing that and not making mistakes. Then, in a move that many saw as calculated deflection, he dragged Solomon into it. I mean, Solomon is thriving. He's a great kid, and he doesn't want to be used as some pawn in a sibling rivalry. Within hours, Solomon, who had remained silent since Gabriel's podcast, posted a cryptic Instagram story. Funny how being silent means you're being used. Maybe speaking up is the only thing that's real anymore. The next slide was a photo of him and Aurora standing side by side, expressionless, with the caption, "We stand with our siblings." It was a quiet revolution, but one loud enough to shake the Brown family's foundation to its core. The Robyn Rift. Robyn, known for staying away from social media chaos, was seen days later leaving a therapy center with Solomon and Brianna. TN's reported that she had requested her family not be included in any further Kody media. In private, sources said she felt betrayed by Kody's attempt to throw Solomon under the bus in a public defense of his own image. He said our kids were off limits, Robyn reportedly told a friend. But when it got hot, he used them as shields. Robyn's kids had long been portrayed as his most protected, but now they, too, were peeling away from his orbit. Not with rage, but with clarity. The family fallout. Within weeks, the fallout was irreversible. Christine voiced support for Gabriel and Janelle on TikTok, saying, "I'm proud of them for being brave. Everyone has their story, and they deserve to tell it." Mary posted a cryptic journal entry on her story, titled, "Thunder Doesn't Mean Truth," widely interpreted as a jab at Kody's performative defenses. Janelle invited Aurora and Solomon to participate in a second podcast episode titled Unscripted Kids. The episode featured their first ever open conversation about being labeled the favored family and how isolating it actually was. Aurora, "I used to think I was lucky, but I just wasn't allowed to say anything that made Dad look bad." Solomon, "When Gabriel told the story about me, I cried, not because he exposed me, but because he saw me." Listeners described the episode as heartbreaking, healing, and historic. The final blow. Gabriel's third episode, titled The Thunder Thief, was the final nail in the coffin. He didn't yell. He didn't attack. He read aloud a series of text messages from Cody sent after the first podcast dropped. "You've always wanted to be a martyr. Why are you doing this to me? You know Solomon is fragile. Why would you drag him into this?" Gabriel's voice was steady. "I didn't drag anyone. I just said the truth. You don't get to weaponize silence anymore." The podcast closed with a recorded voicemail from Garrison, saved months before his passing. "Hey Gabe, thanks for being there. I know Dad doesn't get it, but we do. We always have. Stay strong." Silence followed. Then a simple fade to black. Epilogue, a family rewritten. The House of Cards podcast reached over 50 million downloads in its first month. Solomon and Aurora began therapy advocacy on TikTok. Janelle was named one of Time's 100 most influential voices in mental health. Robyn filed a petition for privacy protection for her minor children, no longer trusting Cody to respect their boundaries. And Cody? He went quiet. His brand sponsorships dwindled. TLC paused all future Sister Wives content. His social media turned from fiery defenses to distant camping photos with captions like "finding peace in nature." But the world had moved on. Not from the family, but from his version of it. The thunder he once stole could no longer drown out the voices that were finally, beautifully, undeniably louder than him.